Bone marrow, I've mostly talked about red bone marrow, but there is another type that I briefly mentioned. So bone marrow is going to be that soft tissue that's in between the space of the spongy trabeculae, and it's also going to be in the marrow cavities, so the medullary cavities of long bones. So what is bone marrow doing? Well, we have the two types. We have red bone marrow. Bone marrow has quite a bit of different tissue types, but the one we think about the most, and that's most important for this course, is the hematopoietic tissue. This tissue is going to produce blood cells, and it's red, so that might help you remember that it's got hematopoietic tissue in it to create blood cells. But realize that blood cells are not just red blood cells. It's going to create red blood cells as well as your white blood cells. And red bone marrow is in nearly every bone in a child because they are constantly growing and producing more red blood cells as well as white blood cells. So a child needs a lot of red bone marrow. However, as you get older and become an adult, you don't need as much red bone marrow. And so it's found in limited regions in an adult. It's found in the skull, the vertebrae, the ribs, the sternum, some of the pelvic girdle, and in the proximal head of the humerus and the femur. So that leads us to yellow bone marrow, which is more commonly found in adults. So as an individual becomes an adult and they need less red bone marrow, then that red bone marrow can kind of transform or be transformed into a fatty marrow. Basically, it's replaced by a fatty marrow or adipose tissue, and so that doesn't produce blood cells. The yellow bone marrow can transform back to red marrow if need be. So if there's chronic anemia that someone's undergoing for some reason, if they're living at higher altitude, or excessive blood cell needs, then the body can convert that yellow bone marrow back to red for better blood cell production. Here is just a figure to show you some of the common places where you find the adult distribution of red and yellow marrow. So you can see in the red here, and this is in your book, it's figure 7.6. You can see the areas where the red bone marrow really is in adults.